revealed, for the first decade of Ruiri's life, was the scent of pine needles after rain, the texture of rough-hewn stone beneath her bare feet, and the resonant hum of her master's evening chants. The mountain was her cradle and her classroom, a silent, looming giant that cupped their small monastery in its palm. Her master, whom she called Shifu, was the only other person in this world. He had found her, had said, a babe wrapped in rags at the foot of the mountain pass, wailing at a sky that had wept with her. He had scooped her up, and she had been his ever since. Shifu was a monk, a man whose movements were as deliberate and placid as the flow of water over mossy stones. He was her father, her teacher, her entire universe. They were, as the text of her life would later read, dependent on each other. He taught her to read the clouds, to identify the herbs that healed and those that harmed, and to find stillness within the storms of her own young heart. He possessed few treasures, for his path was one of detachment. Yet, the treasures he kept were profound. There was a worn set of meditation beads, polished smooth by a century of prayer, and a scroll of calligraphy so beautiful it seemed the characters might leap from the parchment and dance. But the greatest of them all, the object of Ruiri's ceaseless fascination, was the gourd. It was no ordinary vessel, carved from a wood the color of twilight. It was impossibly smooth and cool to the touch, with a deep violet sheen, a single, intricate silver band wrapped around its neck. This was not a gourd for carrying water or wine. This gourd, Shifu explained, carried the sky. Ruiri had seen its magic countless times, on days when a thick, oppressive blanket of gray mist choked the mountain. Shifu would unstopper the gourd, whisper a quiet incantation, and the vessel would thrum with a low energy. A vortex of air would spiral from its mouth, pulling, drinking, eating the clouds from the sky until the brilliant, forgotten sun blazed down upon them. Conversely, on a day of stark, empty blue, he could coax from it wisps of purest white that would unfurl and multiply, painting the heavens with soft, fluffy brushstrokes. "Master, please, may I hold it?" Little Ruiri would ask, her eyes wide with wonder. And every time, the answer was the same, a gentle but firm shake of his head. "The gourd has a will, little one, its heart is not yet yours to know." As the years spun on, Ruiri noticed the changes. The lines around Shifu's eyes deepened, not from smiling, but from a weariness that seemed to pull at his very soul. His morning meditations grew longer, as if it took more effort to find his center. His hands, once steady enough to paint a dragonfly's wing, now trembled when he lifted his tea. He was old, she realized, though the meaning of it was a distant abstraction, a concept she had only read about in his scrolls. Then, one spring, everything changed. Shifu called her to the meditation platform overlooking the valley. The gourd rested between them. "The time has come for you to learn," he said, his voice thin as a high-altitude breeze. He began teaching her the incantations, the specific way to hold the gourd, the focus required to command the winds. To his surprise, and her own, it felt natural. The clever Ruiri, as he called her, did not just learn the method, she felt it. When she held the gourd, she could feel a faint pulse within it, a sleeping heart that beat in time with her own. The first time she successfully cleared the morning mist, a giddy, powerful laugh escaped her lips, echoing across the silent peaks. But her joy was tempered by a growing sorrow. She found that Shifu grew tired more easily, not just of their training, but of everything. He would often close his eyes in the middle of a sentence, a profound exhaustion settling over him. He no longer fought with her over her youthful impatience or her endless questions. He simply smiled, a sad, distant expression on his face. One evening, as the sun bled orange and purple across the horizon, he entrusted her with his final instructions. "Ruiri," he said, his voice a mere whisper, "when I don't wake up, just go down the hill. The world below is different. Be cautious." He pressed the gourd into her hands. "And remember my most important lesson after the descent. Don't break my gourd, ever." He didn't wake up the next morning. The silence in the monastery was no longer peaceful. It was a crushing, absolute void. After sitting vigil for a day and a night, her small hand resting on his cold one, Ruiri did as he had instructed. with the gourd secured to her back and a small bundle of possessions. She began her descent from the only home she had ever known. The journey down the mountain was a disorienting cascade of new sensations. The air grew thick and heavy, filled with the alien smells of wood smoke, livestock, and cooking spices. The symphony of birds and wind was replaced by a cacophony of shouting voices, rattling carts, and barking dogs. The town was a sprawling, chaotic organism of mud, wood, and humanity, and Rayleigh, who had only ever known the company of one, felt like a single leaf cast into a raging river. She was an oddity. Her simple monk's robes, her wide, unblinking eyes that seemed to see too much, and the strange, violet gourd on her back drew stares and whispers. She learned about currency when a baker demanded coins for a piece of bread, a concept as foreign to her as the moon. She learned about hunger, a gnawing emptiness that overshadowed even her grief. One afternoon, a town festival was threatened by a sudden, torrential downpour. People ran for cover, their celebrations ruined. Seeing their dismay, and acting on an instinct to help, Ruiri found a quiet alleyway. She unstopped the gourd and whispered the familiar words. The vortex spun, silent and unseen by the panicked crowd, and drank the storm. Within moments, the rain ceased, the clouds parted, and a brilliant sunbeam illuminated the town square. The people were stunned, then ecstatic, calling it a miracle. But it wasn't a miracle without a witness. A man with eyes like chips of flint had seen her from a tavern window. It didn't take long for Riley to catch everyone's attention. The story of the strange mountain girl who stopped the rain spread like wildfire. While some saw her as a blessing, others saw something else, a tool. People with ulterior motives began to circle her like vultures. The man with the flint-like eyes was named Kale. He led a group of enforcers and thugs who called themselves the Iron Fist. They found her huddled in a stable, shivering from cold and hunger. Kale didn't threaten her, he smiled. A predator's gentle offering. He placed a warm meat bun in her hand. "I hear you have a gift," he said, his voice smooth and persuasive. For very little pay, a full daily meal, Ruiri was hired to be their enforcer. She didn't understand the word. Kale explained it simply. Sometimes, people don't want to be reasonable. You just have to persuade them. Her naivety was the perfect cage. In her mind, she was merely demonstrating her power to encourage cooperation. Rayleigh's magic, in a world of steel and sinew, was a force of nature. When a merchant refused to pay Kale's protection fee, Ruiri would simply point the gourd at the sky above his shop and conjure a small, personal storm cloud that would drench his wares. When a rival gang challenged him, she didn't fight. She spoke the incantation Shifu had taught her for a different purpose, one she now bent to Kale's will. She called it the Seal Flame, a torrent of shimmering, white-hot energy would spew from the gourd's mouth. It didn't burn like a normal fire, it seared the spirit. It flew over the heads of Kale's men and crashed into the enemy's back row, the archers. The leaders, the ones who gave the orders. The men would be thrown back, not by the force, but by the sheer shock of it. And for a full minute afterward, they would be struck by a profound and terrifying silence. Their mouths would open to shout commands or rally their men, but no sound would emerge. Their anger, their will to fight, was sealed away. They were rendered helpless, easy for the Iron Fist to subdue. Her power made them invincible. Kale's influence grew, and so did Ruiri's weariness. The awe and fear in the eyes of her victims began to haunt her. They weren't just unreasonable merchants or faceless rivals. They were fathers, sons, men with families who looked at her as if she were a demon. The warm meals started to taste like ash in her mouth. In those days, she accumulated a lot of knowledge from beyond the mountain. She learned of greed, of cruelty, of the casual violence men inflict upon one another. But she also saw flickers of kindness, a woman sharing her meager bread with a stray dog, a child giving her a wilted flower. Slowly, Ruiri began to understand right and wrong, not as an abstract concept from Shifa scrolls, but as a heavy weight in her own heart. The breaking point came when Kale ordered her to intimidate a family of weavers who were late on a loan. They had a young daughter. No older than Ruiri was when she had first tried to hold the gourd. As Ruiri stood in their humble workshop, the gourd in her hand, the little girl looked at her, not with fear, but with wide-eyed curiosity. In that moment, Ruiri saw herself. She saw the innocent child Shifu had saved, and she saw the monster she was becoming. She lowered the gourd. "No," she said, her voice quiet but unshakable. Kao's smile vanished. "What did you say?" "I will not hurt them." That night, she confronted him. After talking to the group about not wanting to hurt anyone else, Ruiri prepared to leave. Kao and his iron fists were not about to let their greatest weapon simply walk away. They cornered her in the city's main square. "You belong to us, little witch," Kao sneered, drawing a long knife. For the first time, Ruiri was truly afraid. But a different feeling rose to meet it, a cold, hard resolve. Shifu had not given her this gift for it to be used as a tool for bullies and thieves. As the iron fists charged, a deep, resonant hum came from the gourd on her back. It was a feeling Shed only felt in glimpses during her training, a surge of warmth and power, a perfect union of her spirit and the gourd's ancient heart. It was the heart flame. The gourd seemed to fuse with her, its energy pouring into her veins. Her senses sharpened. Her body felt lighter, faster, stronger. Her attack power, her life force, her very speed were all augmented. She and the gourd had become one of Kao's men threw a weighted net, a common tactic for disabling a foe. It was a control effect, meant to trap her, but as the net settled over her, something unexpected happened. The gourd pulsed with a violet light. It was her passive skill, the control seal, awakening. An enemy had subjected her to control, and the gourd would retaliate, a bolt of pure force. Drawn not from her magical energy, but from her own life force, a percentage of her health lashed out and struck a random thug, who crumpled to the ground, clutching his chest. Kao, enraged, bellowed a command, his signature battle cry, his anger skill. "Take her down." Ruiri reacted instantly. She aimed the gourd not at Kao, but at his charging men. "Seal," she cried. The seal flame erupted, a brilliant wave of silent fire that washed over them. Their charge faltered. Their war cries died in their throats. They were silenced. Their aggression momentarily snuffed out. In that precious moment of confusion, she broke free from the net and fled. She didn't know where she was going. She only knew she had to leave. Finding her own purpose was the next step in Riley's quest, and she now knew with certainty that it did not lie in being a weapon for the cruel. Ruiri wandered for weeks, a ghost drifting through the countryside. She avoided towns and villages, subsisting on wild berries and stream water, much as she had on the mountain. But the loneliness was different now. On the mountain, it had been a peaceful solitude. Here, it was the ache of an outcast. Her heart was a leaden weight, burdened by the things she had done for Kao. Was this all the gourd was for? Intimidation and violence. Was this the legacy of her master? The gourd itself felt different. Since the fight, the heart flame connection was stronger, a constant, warm thrum against her back. It seemed to guide her, pulling her ever southward. She followed its silent call, having no other direction to take. Her journey led her to a desolate region known as the Sorrowful Marshes. The land was perpetually damp, the trees skeletal and draped in gray moss. The source of the region's misery was immediately apparent. A single, colossal, dark cloud that hung permanently in the sky above a village. It was not a normal storm cloud. It was a bruised, ugly purple-black, and a constant, sorrowful drizzle fell from it, a rain that felt cold and greasy. The village, named Fenwatch, was a place of deep despair. The people moved slowly, their faces pale and drawn. The perpetual gloom and chilling rain seemed to sap their will to live. Crops failed, sickness was rampant, and a palpable aura of grief hung over everything. They called it the Weeping Cloud, and a local elder told her it had appeared a generation ago, after a terrible plague had swept through the area. They believed it was the concentrated sorrow of all who had died, an unending funeral dirge from the heavens. Ruiri felt an immediate, powerful reaction from her gourd. It vibrated intensely, not with the eager hum of wanting to consume a normal cloud, but with a deep, hungry growl. It was a resonance she had never felt before. It was as if the gourd recognized this weeping cloud as its true and proper food. This was it. This was a purpose beyond making sunny days or hurting people. This was a chance to heal. She stood at the edge of the village, looking up at the monstrous cloud. This would take more power than she had ever used before. She closed her eyes, focusing inward. reaching for the bond she shared with the Gourd. She felt the heart flame ignite within her, not as a desperate defense, but as a steady, empowering warmth. Her mind, body, and the ancient artifact became one. "Breathe," she whispered. The command for both herself and the Gourd. She unstoppered it and aimed its mouth at the heart of the weeping cloud. The vortex that emerged was unlike any she had created before. It was a swirling column of violet light, and it tore into the sky with a sound like a low, mournful horn. The villagers, drawn by the strange noise, came out of their homes and stared in disbelief. The Gourd began to drink. It pulled not just moisture and air, but something else, something intangible. Ruiri could feel it through their connection, waves of despair, echoes of pain, tendrils of ancient grief. The weeping cloud was indeed made of sorrow, and the Gourd, the cloud eater, was devouring it. The strain was immense. It was a battle of wills. The cloud fought back, its sorrowful energy trying to overwhelm her, flooding her mind with images of sickness and death, the collected anguish of the plague victims. Tears streamed down Ruiri's face, not her own, but the tears of the cloud. The Gourd grew heavy in her hands, vibrating so violently her arms went numb. A dark, corrosive energy seeped back from it, trying to poison her. She grit her teeth, her knuckles white. She thought of Shirku. He hadn't taught her how to fight men, but he had taught her how to endure. He had taught her to find a point of stillness in a storm. She focused on his memory, on the scent of pine and incense, on the calm of their monastery. She poured her own will, her own quiet strength, into the Gourd, reinforcing it against the tide of misery. For what felt like an eternity, the battle raged. The violet vortex in the sky pulsed and shuddered. The drizzle intensified, and slowly, miraculously, began to thin. The oppressive purple-black of the cloud started to fade, turning to a neutral gray. Ruiri pushed harder, crying out with the effort, pouring every ounce of her being into the Gourd. With a final, deafening roar, the vortex consumed the last vestiges of the weeping cloud. The sound ceased. The Gourd fell silent, its surface now cold as ice. And for the first time in over 20 years, the sun shone on the village of Fenwatch. Ruiri collapsed, utterly spent. The villagers rushed to her side, their faces filled with a dawning, fragile hope. As they helped her up, she looked at the Gourd. It felt sated, content. She finally understood. It was not a weapon, it was a purifier. Its purpose was not to create or destroy clouds for convenience or intimidation, but to consume the unnatural blights that festered in the sky, the atmospheric scars left by great tragedy. The people of Fenwatch treated Ruiri as a savior. They gave her a warm bed, the best food they had, and, most importantly, their gratitude in the warmth of the newfound sun. The village slowly began to heal, and so did Ruiri's heart. She had found a piece of her purpose. She was not an enforcer, she was a guardian. As she rested and recovered, she spent hours contemplating her master's final warning. "Don't break my Gourd." She had always assumed it was a simple warning not to be careless with a precious artifact. Now, she understood the terrifying weight of those words. The Gourd did not destroy the sorrow it consumed. It contained it, the weeping cloud of Fenwatch. The echoes of a devastating plague were now sealed within its twilight-colored wood. What other sorrows had her master sealed away over the decades? What ancient grief slumbered within that deceptively beautiful vessel? To break the Gourd would be to unleash a cataclysm of concentrated misery upon the world. A plague of the spirit far worse than any physical illness. Her duty was not just to use the Gourd, but to protect it with her life. After a week, she knew she could not stay. Fenwatch was healing, but the Gourd hummed with a restless energy, subtly pulling her towards a new direction. There were other wounds in the world, other scars on the face of the sky. Her departure was different from her flight from the city. She was not running away from a past she regretted, but walking towards a future she had chosen. The village elder gave her a sturdy new cloak and a map of the known lands. "The world is vast. Cloud Eater," he said, giving her the title that now felt right. "May your path be clear." Ruiri, the madman from the mountain, the girl who spoke to the sky, set out once more. She was no longer the naive child who had descended into a world she didn't understand. She was no longer the reluctant weapon of cruel men. She was the inheritor of a sacred duty, a wandering purifier on an endless quest. Her travels took her to sun-scorched plains where a cloud of pure rage, born from a brutal battle, cooked the earth and drove men to madness. It took her to frozen peaks where a cloud of petrified fear, the remnant of a trapped and perished expedition, caused avalanches with its shuddering terror. With each blight she consumed, the gourd grew heavier with contained sorrows, and Ruiri grew stronger in her resolve. She learned to fight, too, but on her own terms. When bandits or zealots who coveted the gourd's power attacked her, she would use the seal flame to subdue without killing. Its silencing power, a mercy that ended conflicts before they could truly begin. She learned to use the environment to her advantage, using her powers to create a sudden fog or a blinding flash of sunlight, often creating the very control effects that would trigger her control seal, allowing the gourd to defend her while she focused on her true purpose. The heart flame became her sanctuary, a meditative state of oneness with her burden and her tool, a source of strength when her spirit wavered. Ruiri never found a permanent home. Her home was the road, her purpose the horizon. She was a solitary figure, forever bound to the beautiful, terrible gourd and the legacy of the quiet monk who had saved her. She was the Cloud Eater, a guardian who walked the earth to heal the sky, ensuring the sorrows of the past remained sealed.